Layer 1 is a podcast and community dedicated to helping you master all things crypto. We'll be bringing you the best interviews with project executives, technical analysis for trading of the most popular cryptocurrencies, and insight into what's actually happening behind the scenes.
As you join us each episode, you're going to hear about tokens, fundraisers, investments, and even crypto conspiracies. But please remember that nothing we say should be considered financial or legal advice.
Come join us on this journey and welcome to Layer 1. All right, guys, we got another episode of Layer 1. We have a great guest, as always, but within the EOS ecosystem, they are one of the most prominent block producers and great guys also. I've seen them on many podcasts, but before we get to Steph and Yves, Dimitri, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. I'm excited for this next interview that we have with EOS. Been looking forward to it for a while, so finally we have him. So let's get into it.
Yeah, man, it's the first time we're doing a dual episode. So, we have two guys, Steph and Yves, both from EOSNation, CEO and Chief Community Officer, Steph. So, guys, it is, I believe, Wednesday. I know you can get that kind of mixed up. Yves, you've been traveling, but how is everyone doing today?
It's like Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, I'm doing great, man. Thank you very much for having us on. This is awesome. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having us on. And excited to get into it.
Great, man. Well, again, this is one of the first times that we're doing the double episode, so we'll see how it goes. I'm sure there will be some mix-ups a little bit, but we're going to try. So basically, we start the episode of kind of y'all's background on kind of before crypto. So as you moved your way into tech, maybe you weren't into tech before, but just your background as a person as it led up to maybe finding Bitcoin or finding Ethereum or finding EOS. How did you guys background?
Yeah, I'll jump into it. So my background is kind of very diverse, and I'm kind of very surprised that I'm sitting here where I am today, although it's super amazing. So basically, I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole late 2016. I was in a book club with some friends. Yves was part of that book club where we've been good friends since high school. And Bitcoin and blockchain was one of the topics. We got more interested in it. Finally pulled the trigger in January 2017, buy my first Bitcoin, go super deep, become an evangelist, talk to everyone I know about it. The feedback is super positive, January, February. And then I'm like, wow, all these normie friends of mine agree with what I'm saying about blockchain, Bitcoin, decentralization. Like, wow, this is gonna go crazy. So I go all in, buy as much Bitcoin as I can, make some amazing trades along the way in 2017. And then Yves was along for the ride as well, but he was still working his job at that time. In December 2017, peak madness, Denis Carrière, another old friend of mine that I hadn't talked to in many years, hits me up on Facebook. He's now our CTO for EOSNation. He just lost his job at Facebook due to a visa mess up at the border of some sorts. So he's like, hey, Steph, I've got time now. You've been posting about Bitcoin all year on Facebook. What is this all about? Yes, finally, a smart developer friend of mine, I grabbed his attention. He comes over, I give him the rundown in an afternoon. He goes back home, whatever. A few weeks later, early January, he calls me. He's like, hey, Steph, I went through all the codes of the top 10 cryptos. EOS is absolutely amazing. I'm going all in on EOS. I'm like, great. That's actually my biggest holding right now, right? In early 2018, price of EOS was doing pretty well. So that was my biggest holding. I was like, great, that's amazing. Good news. Thanks for the heads up, Denis. He calls me back 3 days later. He's like, you know what, Steph? We should become a block producer. What do you mean? Like, we're nobodies. We're not rich people. We're not whales. We're not OG miners. We're not exchanges. We're just dedicated, passionate community members. And then Denis just has this vision. He's like, hey, there's no one right now in the BP game. This is 6 months before the mainnet launch. We have a chance. Let's go for it. I message Yves. I'm like, hey, we've been talking about what we want to do in the crypto space. My friend Denis has a crazy idea. We should become a block producer. Yves right away is like, yes, that's the kind of ambitious project I want to be a part of. So from there, we accumulated some more friends, 7 of us co-founders. And from there, it's been a wild ride. And, I'm super happy to be where I am, super proud of the work that EOSNation is doing, and just super appreciative of all the support that we've received from the community. So that's kind of my perspective of how I got into it. And yeah, how about you, Yves?
Yeah.
What's your perspective on this story?
So my journey, I guess, started a long time ago, maybe indirectly, but I was fortunate enough. I have a lot of uncles and a lot of aunts and uncles, French families, so big families, mom's side, dad's side, both of them, a lot of people, and a lot of them ended up being in software engineering, networking engineering, and kind of the computer space in general. And so when I was really young, I had the opportunity and the chance to be able to always be surrounded with computers. So I started building computers and developing when I think I built my first computer around 6, started developing around 7. So I was always very familiar with the computer space. And originally when I started my studies, I went to software engineering, realized it really wasn't my thing. It was more of a hobby, but I really enjoyed it. And for me, it was always more the hardware side, less of the coding aspect. And yeah, one thing led to the next, and then I was always in those groups. I grew up with the internet. I think I had the internet when I was 8 years old in 1990, and essentially you could do anything on the internet. There was nothing. I built websites on GeoCities, and I was using BBSs before that, and I remember being on BBSs and having my 2400 kbaud modem, and then my 9600 kbaud modem, my 14.4, my 28.8, my 33.6, and going up the chain like that. And so I was always in that realm. And in 2000, I believe it was like early 2010 or early 2011, I was part of some chats, and there was this cypherpunk movement, and there was Bitcoin. That's when the first time I heard about it. So I started mining Bitcoin when I think Bitcoin was around 11 cents at that time. I think the first Bitcoin I mined was around 9 or 11 cents. But it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of cool. It was at the same time where you could use your computer to do some protein folding. So it was kind of the same thing at the time for me, where it's just like, all right, like I run an application in the background, it's doing stuff. I'm not really sure what it's doing. But then I get these magical Bitcoins out of it. But you couldn't do anything with Bitcoin. And so I was mining them for a while, then I was trading them, and I was actually selling them in order to be able to buy more video cards. And I did that for a bit. And I kind of lost it I kind of lost that part when we had heard at the time of these ASICs miners coming out of China. And a bunch of friends of mine and stuff had ordered some, but they hadn't ever received them. So we thought it was a scam. We weren't really sure. By then, the price of Bitcoin was going up a little bit. And that's when I kind of gave up. Like, if this indeed is going to work out, there's no way I'm going to be able to compete with that unless I buy these miners. And I'm not buying these miners because it seems like a scam, and like I'm going to send $1,000 to somebody that I don't know. And like, it just didn't really work out for me. So I got out of that space at that time. And at that time I was living in Japan. So kind of full circle to what we were talking about earlier, is living in Japan, came back to Canada, and just went back to studies, started working, doing some other things, and kind of forgot about that for a period of time until about 2016. Steph, we're in this book club together. I think it was one of the books that we had on the list was, I don't remember the name of it. Do you remember, Steph?
Blockchain Revolution?
Blockchain Revolution, yeah. I think Don Tapscott. And so we had put that on there, and a bunch of the other people in the group weren't into computers. They weren't really into that realm at all, but they thought it really interesting. And kind of got back into it at that time. And then the story that Steph gave is pretty much the rest. And for me, my background was more so, it was computers from a very young age, but then I got into business when I was in Japan. And then I got into, I'm originally a demographics economist. And so I'm an economist, behavioral economist. I was doing that for the federal government, and then doing some business, international business. And I got into politics. And so when I saw the EOS white paper, and when Steph asked, hey, we've got this crazy ideas, we could become a VP. At that time, I'd left my traditional employment, and I was looking to do something in the crypto space. And just kind of hit everything. Like, it had all of the different aspects that I thought I'd gained experience in my previous life. I thought we actually have a chance in doing this. Whereas before, I'd gotten out of Bitcoin because unless I became a miner and I had an actual farm, it wasn't going to happen. Whereas with this, it's like, wait a minute, I actually have a chance to get back into this. And all the stars just aligned. We started EOSNation. I think it was, we just hit our 2-year anniversary. I think it was like January 21st. 2017, where we officially had our first call as EOS Nation.
Those are better times.
Those were different times, definitely different times. We we just, we got together. We didn't really know what that was going to mean. It's still an evolving kind of a role and at the time, we just thought this is something that we could do. We have all of the components that we think are needed in order to be successful at this. And it's been a roller coaster ride since. It's been amazing. And again, like Steph said, can't stress enough, we are, if you look at the rankings, if you look at kind of the composition of who's high in ranking, we are the outlier. We are just the community guys. We are the ones that are on the ground all around the world. I travel quite a bit for this. And we are really kind of that role within the ecosystem. And everybody else around us is these giants exchanges, mining farms, whatever they are in their respective ecosystems. They were there before. And we're kind of like we're EOS Nation, man. We're the guys that actually can go on the ground and get that feedback from the community. And so for us, it's all about the community.
Yeah,
that's why we're here.
Yeah, you guys have been killing it, man. And we have so much to talk to as far as EOS's growth, EOS Nation's growth over the past 2 years. Me and Dimitri worked at ICO Alert on one side of the office. I think we had like 15 people at the height of what we were doing with ICO Alert. And Gall and Rob worked at ICO Alert as well, Rob Finch and Zach Gall, who's with everything. Yeah. So we were highly exposed to the EOS run up, right? Because they were talking about it nonstop. They ended up starting everything EOS. So we were super highly exposed. I do want to talk about everything, not everything EOS the podcast, but everything you guys have done. So you guys are highly kind of distributed. We talked about your team. You guys just talked about your teams. What are the roles of each team member? Kind of like you guys said, you're mostly in Canada, but you have some overseas. What is the team? How do you manage a team of that's that highly distributed?
It's been a learning experience for all of us, right? We've all had old jobs that we left to now just work from home, all of us. And, so Yves is our CEO, our fearless leader with the strategic vision and the overall plan for us as the EOS Nation and for EOS as an ecosystem. And he's done an incredible job. I'm blown away time and time again by the results that we've had. So Yves been doing a great job. I'm a chief community officer. I'm managing social media, interacting with our community as much as possible. When I see things out there that are incorrect, I try to jump in, share some facts with people. I've also built the EOS Nation ambassador team, which has been an absolutely dream job of mine. So in 2017, I was an evangelist, talking Bitcoin, blockchain, whatever. And now I'm basically an EOS evangelist, and I've built a team of 18 other evangelists like me all over the world who are also fans of EOS, EOS.io, Dan Larimer, Brendan Bloomer. And together, we educate ourselves and we try to communicate as much as possible to the entire world through all these ambassadors. So that's been a really a joy for me. Daniel Keys, another of our co-founders, he's been managing a lot of the public projects that we've been helping on for the EOS network, the 1.8 upgrade, the upcoming WPS, and lots of other projects in the background. So he's been doing a tremendous job at that. We've got Vincent, who's more in the back end of EOS Nation, managing our finances, automating all the blockchain finances, matching with the real world financing and the accounting madness that goes along with that. And Dave, our resident American in the team, is done a great job with helping with the marketing and the video editing and the image editing and audio production and video production and all that stuff. And Denis, like I mentioned, our CTO, really good, great intellect in terms of seeing how this thing is going to develop and being able to position ourselves as well in the forefront of that, and just learning a lot over the last 2 years, smart contract development and all the other tech stack that he brought with him. And then I think the last one is Matthew, our infrastructure guy, who's been an absolute beast for us over the last 2 years. Incredible dedication this guy has brought to the team. especially also in the last few months when there was some stability issues on the mainnet. Matthew was out there every day talking with other block producers, talking with Block One, submitting logs, trying to optimize and optimize the mainnet as much as possible. So yeah, and like when we started, right, we only had one tech guy. We only had Denis as a tech guy, whereas all the other BPs that we were competing against, it was mostly tech people, right? And at first we were kind of like, is this good for us? How are we going to be able to compete with these other teams that are so strong technically? Turns out we were able to onboard that technical talent that we needed while also becoming a massive leader in terms of community engagement all over the world. And yeah, and it's worked out so far as great as we could have ever hoped for 2 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. You know, it's always tough to like kind of keep the team together especially when you're distant, and also in this environment where, you know, as fast as crypto moves, responsibilities change quickly, and you have to adapt to certain situations, and you have to have that crew, basically team that's, you know, willing to adapt quickly to ever-changing crypto industry. So what were some like challenges where when you were guys trying to find these devs to join your team, and are you guys looking to, you know, expand more beyond what you guys have now? You know, what do you see in the future for EOSNation in terms of increasing your staff and you know, your team?
Well, in terms of the current composition of EOS Nation, we have, if you include the ambassadors, so if you include, we have quite a bit of interns as well. If you include everybody, really, that's part of the family. We have around 50 people right now, so it's quite big.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite big. We just, for example, onboarded an extra 14 students through an internship program that we're doing with a university here in the region in Quebec. And then we have interns in China. We have an intern in Switzerland as well, like a PhD student and master's students as well. And so if you include everybody, we have quite a bit of staff and members on the team at various levels, right? So the core composition is really the 7 people. And then we have an extra about 5 people that are really core employees. And then we have the varying degrees of ambassadors, interns, etc. So right now, one of the things for us was in order to onboard more developer talent over time, it really kind of came organically. People reached out to us continuously, you know, asking whether or not we needed help. And we really partnered with a couple of teams very early on. And when they, you know, saw an opportunity to kind of leave their employment or shut down kind of what the projects that they were working on, it just happened to be at the right time where we were looking for some people. So we have, so that's kind of how we grew and how everything came about. And it's really organic. So it moves up and down based on kind of what's going on around us. So the level of talent or the number of people that we need really is never an issue, because there's always people looking forward to get involved. So that's not necessarily the bottleneck.
Yeah, speaking of involvement, I am super interested in this ambassador program. Where have you seen the most success with maybe just numbers on the ground with this ambassador program? What geographic locations have been really interested in EOS?
Yeah, so right away in February 2018, when we're trying to think up of our EOSNation strategy, we know we want to be community focused. How are we going to make that happen? We think, okay, let's try to build an ambassador team. Are people going to care? Are people going to apply? We had no idea, right? Right away, we get tremendous response from Nigeria and other regions of Africa. Yeah, and these guys, especially Toju Kaka, Samuel Joseph, Emmanuel Balaboa, from Nigeria, they were some of the first people to apply, and they've been some of our most dedicated ambassadors ever since. So we weren't sure if we were going to pay our ambassadors or not at first, right? When we were still designing the program. And then, excuse me, one of the applicants was this psychologist from Italy, I think. And he didn't join the team after all. It wasn't really a good match. But what he talked to me about is like, hey, you should probably make this team based on implicit motivation instead of explicit motivation. So by making the team volunteer based, we didn't get people that were just applying for a job and to try to get a bit of money. We really only got people that applied that were just passionate about EOS.io and also passionate about educating their local communities. And so it grew organically from there. We've had some ambassadors join the team and leave for whatever reason, health reasons, professional reasons, all over. So it's very fluid. But Nigeria, we have a strong presence out there. We have 2 in Switzerland. We have in Guatemala, United States, London, and I'm gonna forget a bunch of places. But it's been we really couldn't have anticipated where the demand would come from, and we were happy to see an immediate demand from Africa, the African regions, and these countries that we think could really benefit from blockchain technology, right? Like us in Canada, when I tell people like, hey, you can hold Bitcoin and the government won't take your money from you. People are like, so what, Steph? The government's not going to do that anyways, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not the same situation in a lot of places around the world. That's about it.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think I do want to talk about China in general. I know, Yves, you said you were in Japan, so you're in that Asian region, and how that's kind of played out on EOS, right? We've seen the governance back and forth between most of these block producers that you're talking about that are in the top 21 with you are Chinese block producers. Obviously, we've had a ton of issues with Western block producers kind of, I don't know how to put this lightly, but not liking what's going on with EOS as far as governance. What has been the relationship or what has been your experience with governance on EOS? I know we're going to get to the worker proposal, guys. We're going to get to voice. I know everybody wants to hear about that stuff, but what has been your experience with these Chinese block producers and kind of reaching across the literal ocean and trying to mend fences maybe to move EOS forward?
So like I was saying earlier, when I shared kind of my personal story, I lived in Asia for a period of 6 years. So when we first started EOSNation, and I guess based on just general sense of where the tokens were being held, who would most likely be the first kind of area in the world that would take adoption to blockchain as a whole, and who would kind of have the lowest barrier of entry as well for kind of regular mainstream people. All signs for us pointed to Asia. And me having lived in Asia for a long period of time, and my wife's Japanese, I have a son, he's half Japanese. The general idea was, all right, this is going to be a very important place for us to be and spend time. And again, knowing that there's always going to be the cultural and language barriers that are always going to prevent or make things a little bit harder. So you're going to need to work a little extra hard to make sure that there's no misunderstandings. And so early on, I think it was before even the mainnet launch, I headed to China. We were the first block producer, Western block producer, to head to China. We had meetups there. We started, talking with the community there, talking with the token holders there, and it was just overwhelming. It was insane the amount of, I guess, passion and the level of just general involvement that was there compared to, for example, where we are in Canada. It's an Ethereum stronghold, and then just population-wise as well. We're talking about completely different scales. So when I was doing a meetup here in Canada, maybe we get 50 people showing up in China with less than 24-hour notice, and we were getting 400, 500 people, 1,000 people. It's just insane, right? It's not at all the same thing. Plus, a lot of the token holders in China were already used to perhaps using in-game currencies through gaming, for example. They were already used to blockchain mining with Bitcoin mining, for example. So they were already involved in the ecosystem. So the barrier of entry for them was much lower than a lot of the people that we were talking to here. And so I spent my first tour in China was 3 weeks. And then I did a month tour, and then at some point I was basically living in China, living in Asia. I just came back from Japan 2 days ago. I was there for the last 3 months. And so we just really recognized the importance of that area of the world. So South Korea, China, Japan, very, very important area. And so for us, we never took a, how can I say, like confrontational stance with a lot of our counterparts. We always were very, very open to having discussions with them. And so over time, we just built the relationships, and those relationships for us have been very, very positive. So as much as people want to say, it's concentrated in an area that's bad, well, that's where the tokens are, and that's where there's adoption. That's where the developers are. That's where people are actually placing importance on this. So if you're looking at areas in the world where nobody's holding EOS or they're not developing on EOS, well, of course, they're going to have less say in the network because it's all about skin in the game through DPoS, if really, we're in this consensus mechanism. So for us in general, because we built those relationships, whenever there are issues with governance or whenever there are challenges, because there's always going to be some iterations that we always want to move forward, we want to have innovation. For us, having that back and forth with them has been very easy, very, very easy from the get-go. And so from our point of view, and we've been very open and honest about this, we don't see that as a problem. We see that as a strength. There is a part of the world right now that is placing a lot of importance on blockchain, specifically on EOS, and we need to help them do that. And we need to, do that on our end as well. It can't just be on their shoulders. And so we're, trying to raise adoption on our side of things, and other block producers need to be doing the same as well. And as more people start using this platform and start seeing the benefits of blockchain and of EOS specifically, then you're going to see that there's going to be different decentralization or different localities in the world that are starting to pick up and are starting to go up in rankings, if that's really what you're looking at.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about specifically about BPs and how some of these exchanges, for example, like Binance today came out that they're going to offer staking for EOS. How is that going to impact BPs? Knowing that is Binance going to act in that good faith for the community and vote for respected BPs like you guys? Or are they just gonna, vote for, some of their buddies or whatnot? How are these exchanges that offer staking for EOS how they're gonna impact BPs in the end, in your opinion?
So from our point of view, even before mainnet launched, we were very vocal about how decentralization is a spectrum, and so the strength of any ecosystem is multivariate. There's not one thing that's really important. There are many things that are important for an ecosystem to thrive. So we were very vocal even before mainnet launched that we thought that exchanges are quite crucial in the ecosystem in general. If there's going to be a country that's going to be trying to move regulation along, regulation is legislation, they're going to reach out to somebody. They're not going to reach out to a guy in his basement. They're most likely going to reach out to an exchange because they've got the most say, they're the biggest players, and they have the legal team. So they provide that kind of functionality. If there's a user that's going to be coming in the ecosystem and wants an on-ramp or off-ramp place, they're going to go through the exchanges. The exchanges for us from the very beginning fulfill a very crucial role within the blockchain space as a whole. So we recognize that very early on. Now, when EOS first started, there were very few exchanges in the ranks. There were really two exchanges that kind of dominated the EOS space. And although that's good, and it's because they brought visibility to EOS very early on, over time, what you want is you actually want more large players to come in, because then it decentralizes the power that any one of those players might have. And so now we've got Binance that's coming in. For my point of view, I think that this is very, very positive, because now instead of having 2 players or 3 players, now you have 4 players, 5 players that are able to kind of create more security for the ecosystem, because they're not going down. Regardless of what the price of EOS is, they're not going to lay down staff or hire new staff. So their production, their value that they're bringing to the ecosystem does not necessarily change based on the value of the token. So that's very, very important. And also what it does is that it decentralizes that power that currently exists within the token holder ranges. It also brings more visibility to EOS. So right now with Binance coming in as a player, then they will now be incentivized to put more focus on EOS, because if they want to get more tokens and be higher in the ranking, they're going to need to attract people if they're going to do promotions on EOS. So one of the things you mentioned is, for example, staking. Well, for token holders, that's extremely important. So we have kind of a composition within the top 21. If it was nothing but exchanges, then I would say that that's not necessarily a good thing, because then you don't have diversity within the ranks. So you need different types of players that can bring different types of value to the ecosystem. Binance coming in, I think, is very positive. And then within this current time frame that we find ourselves in right now as well, we're in a bear market, sideways market now for quite a sustained period of time. A lot of the token holders just want some type of return in order to stay within the ecosystem. So having these staking rewards, which we also do through our mining pool, our proxy for nation, we think is very important for end users, for token holders. A side effect of that that's very important as well is that within EOS, we have 1% of inflation that goes to block producers. When the block producers give back the rewards to the token holders, what that does is it actually lowers the cost of blockchain operations for the token holder. So right now we ran the numbers, I think it was last week or the week before, and the cost to token holders to run the EOS blockchain essentially is minimal. It's like 0.000157 cents per transaction. It's a joke.
I think it was $100,000 per day that it costs.
Which is a joke. It's something like 3,000 times cheaper than Ethereum, for example.
And that's before we take into consider voter rewards, right? So of that 100,000, a portion of that goes back to token holders. So if you compare that to Ethereum, Ethereum costs about $100,000 in fees per day for transactions, plus about $3 million in inflation, right? So you see the difference. Now the market cap of Ethereum is still higher, so you need to take that into consideration. But even doing that, it still ends up that EOS is something like 6 times cheaper than Ethereum on a per day basis.
So it really creates that competition and really creates that free market effect where the people that will be able to run the blockchain the cheapest are advantaged. And so these exchanges clearly have an advantage. They have a lot of stake. They already have quite a bit of operations. You know, they already have a lot of staff. What that does for you in the end as a token holder, it just means a cheaper blockchain experience. And ideally as well, then when you're talking about will they vote for block producers that bring value, then that's our job to educate them as to what that composition should be. So I can say, for example, the Binance yesterday or this morning, depending on where you are, they added some votes in the ecosystem for the first time, and EOSNation benefited 100% from those votes. They put in 9 million, we got the full 9 million. And so really it's our job to educate them as to why it's important to have diversity within the ranks and kind of educate them as well as what everybody's doing and why that fits in the piece of the puzzle and why having 21 EOS nations in the ranks is probably not a good idea, and having 21 Binances in the ranks is not a good idea. So what's an ideal composition? Obviously everybody's got a different opinion on that. Yeah. That's DPoS. And then you speak with your tokens. That's really what it is.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on what happened with Steemit, last week as far as the Tron Foundation and with Justin Sun and all these things. But one thing I've always viewed as kind of the X factor within the EOS ecosystem, or kind of that ace in the hole, however you want to view it, Block One, right? Like, where does Block One fit in with all of their tokens, and do they just take I know they're super interested in kind of staying within government regulations, but how does Block One kind of move itself into position to maybe take part in the ecosystem, or do they not want to take part at all? They're just hands off.
So I actually, before, just because we were talking about something earlier and you were asking how do the rankings change in EOS and how, is it once every 24 hours? Like what happens in this call right now in the last 20 minutes, we just got 18 million votes and we're now back in 3rd position. So like in EOS, this is kind of the
layer one
effect.
DPoS.
It's layer one. We're not even live. We're not even live. Layer one recorded. Only 4 people know, but still somehow DPoS knows. But yeah, anyways, I just want to interject because I'm like, if I seem this not concentrated right now, it's because I'm just getting these alerts. It's going crazy. We're actually at our all-time high. We're at 326 million.
Congrats.
So obviously Block One is an ace in the hole for EOS. Some people think that Block One don't care about the EOS mainnet. I think that's outrageous. And I think that's going to become very clear over the next few months and few years. So, back when voter rewards started becoming popular on the mainnet, a lot of people were comparing the situation to Lisk. Hey, voter rewards on Lisk led to the degradation of the chain because the BPs had no money and they couldn't develop the chain, right? Well, on EOS, we're not financing the development of the protocol from the network's market cap. That development comes from Block One, and that's independent of whatever's going on EOS. So we know that EOS.io, the protocol that we're based on, will continue to be improved, and that's Block One. And we know, guaranteed, Block One is very focused on building EOS.io to be as great as it can, right? We're running the public mainnet. There's other public EOS.io chains out there. There's private EOS.io chains out there. And Block One is building the software so that it can be customized for whatever we need. So I think that for Block One to maintain its goodwill and narrative power, the EOS mainnet needs to succeed. If the EOS mainnet fails miserably, that's not going to be good for Block One and their company. So to me, it's clear that Block One wants EOS to succeed. And like you said, it's clear that they have a lot of legal restrictions in how they can express that in public, in terms of not controlling EOS, in terms of making sure they don't have undue influence over EOS for all these complicated legal reasons that I really am not an expert in, right?
And everyday token holders don't really see what we see as well. So in the sense that because we're intimate with the code, we're intimate with the software, obviously we have to work hand in hand with Block One. And so from a token holder perspective, that's not necessarily in our position having to work with Block One on a daily basis. They don't see the level of work that necessarily Block One is doing and the amount of resources that pouring into the mainnet. However, what we can tell you is that they are, I mean, especially in the last 2 months or so, we've been working with them literally daily. Doesn't matter the time of day, doesn't matter if it's a Saturday, Sunday, the weekends don't exist. Christmas Day, New Year's, whatever, it didn't matter. We were on the phone with them and in Telegram and in chats, etc., nonstop. Block One is extremely dedicated to the mainnet, and the power that we gave them, like Steph said, is that they don't need to worry necessarily about the short-term noise. They don't need to focus their attention on trying to lobby in order to get more funds to run their operations. Their operations are good. They can operate at this point for an extensive period of time without having to do anything else. Now, of course, could they have done better with communication? Sure, there's certain things that they could have done better. It's not that they're doing everything that's great, but will they be there for the long term? And have they done, in my opinion, what they should have done in order to be there for the long-term success of the main work? Definitely.
Yeah, I've always felt that they could have done a better job in the outreach factor where that you guys were going over to China and doing all these things. I'm sure they were. Again, I'm not intimately like day to day working with, or knowing what Dan and Brendan are doing on that daily basis. But we've reached a part in the episode. Everyone's been waiting for it. Worker proposal system. You guys just launched this, so we do want to hear about it. I think
we haven't launched it.
Oh, not yet. You guys are putting forth this proposal. So
correct.
And I think we're even front running Zach Gall from Everything EOS. You're going to be on Everything EOS just discussing it in a live AMA. So I'm glad we got you first. But worker proposal system. Just give us the full rundown. What's the timeline? What is the feature? What is the utility?
So we've been working, I guess, on different WPS systems, worker proposal systems now for a little over a year. And even prior to that, within the EOS white paper, the general, I guess, the idea in the very beginning was that there was going to be some kind of a WPS function within. And that actually brought me to EOS. That's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed EOS, because I like the system in Dash. And Dash was one of my first crypto purchases after I came back into the system. Bitcoin was always number one, but Dash was, I really enjoyed, and I really liked the idea that there was a funding mechanism from within the system that could continue funding the system itself. And so if properly done, and if there was a lot of value created, it could feed off of itself. And so we started looking into these systems early on. There was a first iteration that was brought about very early after the mainnet launch, which didn't really kind of pick up, but the general sense and idea was there. And so we started looking at BOSS, and we designed and developed the WPS system in BOSS. And then we started learning from that. We started learning about token holder behavior, about proposer behavior, about the economics of what that does to an ecosystem, and how that would work. And as well, through one of our ambassadors who's heavily involved in Dash, how does it work in other ecosystems? So we kind of took all of that together, went to Rio for the EOS Community Conference back in the fall of 2019. And we started talking to other people about this idea to reinvigorate a WPS system. And if so, what would it look like? And we designed kind of the general blueprints of what it could look like while we were in Rio. And then we partnered up with Attic Lab, fantastic guys who essentially, both of us together, both teams together, we shared responsibilities to pretty much put pen to paper on what was discussed in Rio, based as well on BOSS, based as well on Dash, based as well on the referendum that we built for EOS as well, kind of taking everything that we had learned and putting into this new system for a purpose. And over the last, I guess, 5 months or so, we developed this. We then released it publicly on testnet so that people could start reviewing the code. And then we finally just released last week the UI portal that we're going to propose essentially. We released some videos to kind of explain what the design was, what the parameters are going to be, what we're going to suggest at first. We've been talking to other block producers as well, because it requires consensus. This is not something that EOSNation can do by itself. It requires people to actually agree to this. So we've been talking to the community about it, sharing, gathering some feedback, making some modifications. And generally the idea is that if all goes well, we would be proposing the MSIGs in roughly maybe 2 weeks or so. The system is pretty much done. The UI is pretty much complete. The contracts are all done. They're being audited now by a couple of teams and people within the ecosystem that are renowned to be very good at reviewing code. And then the general idea is really to retain that talent. We have a lot of talent that was developed over the last 2 years, and obviously due to rankings and due to external factors, then some of those teams are no longer maybe in paid positions, but there's still a lot of talent out there. So we wanted funding mechanisms for people to be able to essentially stay within the ecosystem, not just retain the talent, but also attract new talent. And so all of this went into the design that we created, that we're putting forward. We're really looking forward to kind of what the community members and what the developers and because it's not just code, but there's going to be perhaps some people that want to do meetups, or perhaps some people that want to do educational aspects, comms, PR, marketing. And so we're really looking forward to what people are going to bring to the system. What we did is create the base layer architecture so that it would enable people to be able to at least propose something. And so everything is on chain, everything is open source. There's no administrators, there's nobody running the system. It's essentially the system running itself. And that's kind of our offering, and something that we've been working on now for almost 5 months.
No, that sounds awesome. I wanted to ask, how do you guys deal with, once it's released, if the worker proposal is going to be flooded with a bunch of proposals from all over the world, from many people that are passionate about EOS, what's going to be kind of the expected turnaround? Because there's a mechanism, right? Obviously there for the voting, right? And how do you get these BPs that are some like exchanges, for example, to participate in this as well? Are they on board? Do they have a specific staff that's going to be dedicated to this? What's going to happen there?
So one of the things that we learned from the referendum on EOS, from the referendum system, as well as from the WPS system, which is very different, but the WPS system on BOSS, is that there is a low voter turnout. People generally do not participate very much. And as you said as well, what happens if there's flooding? What happens if I have to review 150 proposals? Clearly, I will not be able to review 150 proposals. So we needed to put parameters in and kind of design an architecture that would take that into account. The way that we've done it in our system is multifold. One of them, obviously, to reduce the amount of proposals and to increase the level of seriousness of proposal and the level of quality of the proposals, is to include an administrative fee. Now, this administrative fee for our proposed design right now is 100 EOS. So the cost of that is about $300. So if you have to put roughly $300 on the line in order to just be seen, that will reduce the amount of proposals that are perhaps maybe not as serious right now. Or maybe it'll make it so that and this is all based on data on Dash. Dash has been running for over 5 years. Similar thing for them, it's about $350 right now. And so we see that what this does is the people prior to posting a proposal, they do a lot more work in the background. They reach out to a lot more people. They get vetted way earlier than instead of just kind of putting it on chain and wiping their hands clean and hoping that something magically happens. There's a lot of time that goes into the lobbying aspect, a lot of time that goes into the selling aspect. So as a proposer, if you're looking to get funded, a lot of the work comes back on you to actually translate your proposal, to go and market this proposal, to provide all the documentation perhaps that will increase the viability of your proposal getting approved, to doing the outreach to specific people. And so all of that we incorporated within the design so that it would reduce the amount of proposals, increase the quantitative amount of proposals, increase the qualitative portion of the proposals. And then obviously at the end, then the block producers have a role in this as well. So if I have 10 proposals to review, it makes my job much easier than if I have 100, right? So then how do we keep the block producers incentivized to participate in this system? In Dash, we see that roughly 20% of nodes, in their case of our equivalent of BPs, about 20% of them over time participate in this system. In our case, through the current parameters that we've done, that means between 12 and 15 block producers will generally participate in each and every single proposal. So either upvote, downvote, or abstain. And then you're going to have to go and reach out to these extra that don't necessarily participate in every single one. So our threshold to start with is a plus 20 delta, meaning that you need to have at least 20 more positive votes than negative votes or abstain votes. So you need to finish at snapshot time with at least plus 20. And then because we give the possibility of people to downvote as well, then that's kind of a security feature within the system, but it also gives direct feedback to the kind of proposal that the BPs want to see. And so the BPs, how are they incentivized to participate in this? Well, because they're voted in by the token holders. And we know through data gathered through the referendum system that some block producers are being voted, for example, give a clear example, by Western proxies. And those Western proxies were putting pressure on the block producers. You need to go and vote on each proposal. If you do not, I will remove you. And if I remove you, by the way, I'm keeping you above the pay threshold. And so you have direct incentivization to participate.
Yeah.
Now the exchanges, are they incentivized as much? Well, not necessarily. Most likely what we see through data gathered on Dash as well is that at the beginning of the launch of the system, we will most likely see more participation from block producers. And over time, that participation will wean off. And those large exchanges won't be as incentivized to participate, which is not necessarily a problem. And so the system itself, and this is part of the reason as well why we put the same voting weight for, depending on your ranking, it doesn't matter. So if you're number 1 or if you're number 60, which is roughly the cutoff right now for the pay threshold, you get the same weight. What that does, it really gives a different viewpoint of the kind of thing that should be useful for the ecosystem and the kind of ways to bring value in the ecosystem.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it there, but what is that threshold? Like how many are you basing it on EOS per day daily reward, correct?
Yeah, so it's the same threshold that is already built within the system, which is 100 EOS per day. So in EOS right now, if you don't meet 100 EOS per day rewards, you cannot claim your rewards. You essentially don't make any rewards. And so we use that exact same threshold. And the way that we did it is you need to have at time of snapshot in the 30-day cycle, have at least been in that ranking, in that paid position for the last 24 hours. Now, some people will say, well, why didn't you make that longer? Why do you stop it at 100? Well, because we need to have some level of cutoff with some level of accountability. So if we put the cutoff, let's say, to 5 EOS per day, well, then anybody could just register, spin up a BP, and then attack the system. So a big part of it was for Sybil resistance, but it's also to use the current systems that exist within and on the chain right now that are already in place, that are already there. So we leverage a lot of the work that's already been done by Block One and the game theory and the economics and everything that's already built in, that are already there. But instead of using it through token holder weight, then we flatten it out so that it really, really gives a broader perspective or a broader viewpoint of what could be useful or what could be defined as value.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a worker proposal system that was in place. Obviously, we saw the burn and the lowering of inflation. That was your guys' proposal?
So there's no worker proposal that's been ever in place.
Okay, so
this would be the first one if it gets approved, because we're not there yet. If it were to get approved, this would be the first time that EOS has a worker proposal system.
Okay, so what was that pool termed as? I'm blanking at the moment.
So when EOS was created, the idea was that there was 5% inflation. Of that 5%, 1% went to block producers and 4% went to a future non-existent worker proposal system.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
That was upon launch. Now that 4% never got used. That 4% was accumulating in an account called EOSIO.saving. That EOSIO.saving over time in total accumulated roughly 68 million EOS tokens. I don't remember the exact date, but about 6 months or so ago, we proposed the burning of that savings. However, and it got passed, it got approved. So 34 million tokens at the time, I think it was 33.8, got burned. That account went back to zero. However, the inflation mechanism was still there. So it started accumulating right away. at a 4% rate. We just 2 weeks ago, EOSNation proposed the first MSIG was removal of that 4% inflation. So that essentially, if you want to, like, in terms of analogy, we turned off the tap.
Yeah.
So the tap was turned off, no longer any inflation going to EOS savings, and then we burned the savings. So essentially now that account has zero and none of it is being refilled. Now what that does is it removes inflation in the system, which increases the value of each token because there's less tokens available.
Yeah,
so that's positive for all the token holders.
Yeah, there's definitely a debate among token holders, among developers, whenever that burn does come around, right? Because they're like, why don't you use that for the ecosystem? You guys are trying to do that with the WPS proposal that you guys have now. I guess that's an important thing to point out before we move on, because I think we have hit this work proposal system real well. One, where's the funding come from, right? Because people always are expecting, okay, it has to come from inflation, right? But you guys are actually going back to another pool of funds that was created through like a pre-Rex time, or like I believe it's some type of name service. If you could break that down. And then I guess the other problem that was happening with that pool that you guys burned was, well, once you get that pool, wherever the funding does come from, how do you go about making sure that there is no collusion to maybe to give somebody that doesn't deserve this money or doesn't deserve this funding the funds, right? So how do you attack those two problems?
So the first point that you mentioned is kind of where is that funding coming from? If it's not coming from inflation, then where is it coming from? And so what we had in EOS is, prior to Rex being deployed on May 1st, 2019, we had name fees and now I'm blanking. Name fees and, help me out, Steph. RAM fees that were being accumulated in two separate accounts, name fee and RAM fee accounts. And once Rex started, then every name fee and RAM fee from then on then went into Rex. But prior to this, we had about 3.5 million EOS that accumulated in those two accounts, and essentially wasn't being used. They were administrative fees, so they weren't inflation. They were voluntary administration, in the sense that if you wanted to buy a premium name, you voluntarily paid to do this. The network rendered a service to you. So it wasn't a taxation, or it wasn't tax on anybody. And when we were talking about designing the WPS, that was very important for token holders. This is something that we heard time and time again, was that if there's going to be a WPS, it cannot use inflation. So hence the burning of the inflation, hence the burning of turning off of the inflation and burning of the savings. But we did have these tokens that are there and essentially were administrative fees from the network. And so if you never bought a premium name, you've never paid for this. If you've never, invested or speculated on RAM, you've never paid for this. So you paid for your accounts, and then there's cost to those accounts that went to the legacy
service. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was never any, it was always voluntary. There was never any, the network never pressured you to do this. This was always your action, and the network basically reacted to it. So that's kind of the first part. So why those funds? Now, what's important, and kind of, you didn't ask it, but it's important in there, is some people say, well, why did you burn the 60, whatever was left, the 34 million, but in total 68 million? You're basically removing any potential of WPS. Well, 64 million tokens at current, valuation is way more than enough money that we need to be able to perhaps start a WPS system and see whether or not we're able to create value, especially if the premise is that we're afraid that people are going to maliciously use these funds, right? So the way that we're doing it in the current design is that we're starting off with 25,000 EOS per 30-day cycle available, which means that it's quite likely, it's possible and quite likely that the 25,000 EOS per month available is not going to be used. And most likely that will be the case. Most of it will not be used on an ongoing basis. Now, if we take the premise that every single month from the very beginning, the 25,000 is going to be used, we have 6 years leeway worth of WPS. Within that 6-year span, if we really saw that this system is extremely valuable, that brings a lot of value to the network, we have plenty of time to be able to figure out how to replenish those funds down the line. This is not a problem at all. And also what happens as well is, if really is bringing value to EOS and the value of EOS is going up, actually what we do over time is we actually turn down the 25,000. Maybe it goes down to 20,000 or 15,000 because each EOS is worth more. And so you're able to out more with a less amount of EOS. So really not a problem in terms of will it be depleted. This is most likely not an issue. the issue would be more so, is it being abused? And do we then just shut off the system? So one of the things that we wanted to ensure was to within the system, put in some parameters that ensured that if the system were to be gamed, or if we felt that it was being gamed, or that the output was less valuable than what the input was, then we could turn it off at any moment. And this is what's very, very and significantly different than what was proposed about 2 years ago as a system. What we do is that there's no funds that are transferred in the WPS account. So the current name fee and RAM fee funds remain as is, and every single month the block producers have to sign an MSIG in order to transfer 25,000 EOS to that EOS WPS account. Now, if at any point they felt that the system was being rigged or that the system was being gamed, they would simply shut it off. They would not fund the system. And then that particular account, even if it was rated, at the maximum it could be rated would be 25,000 EOS. That's it. That there's very little. We also need to keep in mind that most likely the people that will be applying for WPS are going to be using this to fund their operations, which means that the number needed to be small enough so that if 100% is sold, which most likely 100% will be sold, that it does not impact liquidity or does not impact kind of the valuation of EOS because too many tokens are being dumped. 25,000 EOS is a joke. It's even less than one block producer currently in the top 21 makes per month.
You're talking about my bags, man.
It doesn't matter. But what I mean is, if you sell your bags today, the market will not react. It does not care if you have less than 25,000 EOS, right?
I'll be a whale one day.
All of this together, we really try to, as much as possible, incorporate parameters that we knew will be, or some people will try to abuse. However, at the end of the day, our big thing and the big vision, the baseline was more value needs to be created than extracted. So even if we assume, and we should assume, that some EOS will be wasted, at the end of the day, as long as more value is created than EOS is wasted, then the system wins. Even if it's a 1.01 ratio, even if it's a tiny, tiny ratio, in the long term, that will make a significant difference. If at any point we see that the estimated value of the system goes down and is now negative and continues to go negative, the top 21 could at any point cancel it. Now, if the premise is that the top 21 is evil and is going to be abusing this, then all of this is futile anyways, because the top 21 can do anything they want regardless. And so it's not 25,000 EOS that's going to make any difference. They could have pillaged the savings. They could pillage the accounts completely. They could transfer more than that. Then it just becomes, the system has been overtaken regardless. Nothing we do could prevent this anyways.
Oh, no, that sounds great. I like how you outlined it, perfectly, every single segment of it. And I like how you said, starting out slowly, see how it performs and then adjust according to that. That's amazing, rather than just going in with the full, steam, with full capital there. So I really like how you guys are going about it. WPS, good luck with that proposal. I don't see why not, why it shouldn't be, approved. I think it's going to be a great thing. So to kind of move along a little bit away from WPS, since we already discussed it quite a bit, I wanted to ask you, given like the market conditions right now, and I host Dimitri's desk, talk about the EOS price quite a bit, and obviously with the overall market downturn, it took quite a bit of a hit. How does that affect? Does it affect BPs in any way? Are there any hedging tools that BPs use to prevent some of these rewards, dropping in value and so on, or are some of the BPs maybe getting squeezed out, whatnot? What does this stand from the BPs in terms of the EOS price, maybe descending a little bit during this time?
So definitely that the EOS price going down does affect BPs. And we saw that last year as well when EOS went down to roughly 150, 160 US dollar mark. And so going back to kind of what we talked about earlier with exchanges and large players, that's part of kind of the defense of the system. If players within the top 21 are able to run at a deficit or run negatively for a sustained period of time, then the system itself is more secure. That's why I'm saying that maybe having 21 independent block producers in rankings is not necessarily the safest thing, because then what happens is when EOS takes a downturn, which sometimes has nothing to do with EOS, but the overall, right now it's a global market, it's Bitcoin market, it's overall crypto market, but also external factors as well, which aren't even in the crypto market. When the system starts kind of suffering in a way and the price goes down, you need to have block producers that are resilient to that and that can run a deficit, or that can run negatively for a sustained period of time without changing their output value. So within EOSNation, I can tell you that it definitely makes a difference. We as co-founders, when we talked about earlier, we have 7 core co-founders. We do not take any salaries. We were, just to put it in some perspective, last week we were literally having a conversation as to whether or not we should send ourselves $100 for the week. No joke, because prior to, pre-tax or whatever, we're like, oh, we've got $900 maybe overage this week after our operational costs. Should we send $900 to the founders? And like, $900 after tax, it's like $100 per person. Like, it actually makes a significant difference. So for us, overall, over the last 2 years, EOSNation has not realistically in any way, shape, or form that you could consider being a fair compensation model. Zero. We've essentially not taken anything that you could consider even being a minimal livable wage.
As the number 2 block producer on EOS, you guys...
Well, so my position, and I'm extremely strict with this as a CEO, my position with this is that we are not in a time right now where we can, in a way, harvest. So the Chinese saying or whatever is like, it's not harvesting season right now. And the way that I put it is that we are, as a block producer, a startup in a startup, which is EOS, in a startup, which is blockchain, in a bear market. How the hell are we supposed to pay ourselves in a startup, in a startup, in a startup, in a bear market? How can we justify that? I don't think that makes business sense. So from very beginning, what EOSNation has done, and it's definitely proved to be to our advantage, is we've taken all the rewards that we're making, and we've, like you were saying earlier, is there a way to hedge, or is there, we've been very, very financially prudent. We've been very frugal with our finances. We've reduced our operational costs, and we've put a lot into savings so that whenever the market takes a hit, our output doesn't need to go down. Our output remains the same. And even at times, what we've done is that we've actually increased the output during a downtrend in order to counter that downtrend, to try and lift up the price of EOS in our sphere of control, whatever way we can.
Awesome. That sounds great, man. So we want to move on to voice beta here. Obviously it was launched February, Valentine's Day. I want to know what you guys' thoughts are. Steph, I want to know if you're on voice, because I did listen to Yves with Gall kind of somehow hop into Gall's account and then post for him and things like that. So I saw that episode. But Steph, I want to know if you're on voice beta and what you guys thought pre-launch and what you think now as we go forward.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited about voice. Obviously, as a community manager, I'm on social media all day, every day. It's kind of crazy. I like it, but still kind of crazy. And like, so my Facebook used to be very private. Privacy is important to me. I think it's super important. I used to be super private. In 2017, when I became an evangelist, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to tell people I like Bitcoin. So then I came public with that. And then in 2018, when we started EOSNation, I'm like, okay, if I want to talk about EOS, I guess I'm going to go public. So I went public on all my settings on all my social media, right? I get bombarded by bots every day. Hey, hi, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes it's not a bot. Sometimes it's actually an EOS community member that's reaching out for whatever reason. So like 9 times out of 10, I answer and I'm like, no, this is a bot. And then sometimes it's a real person. So for me, a social network that requires KYC is something that I'm super excited about. We've done the anonymous social networks, anonymous, Reddit, Facebook, whatever. You don't need to back what you say with your identity. And that leads to a lot of toxicity, a lot of low quality conversation, a lot of trolling. So I'm pretty excited to get rid of all of that and enter this new platform. So no, I'm not on it. I'm a Canadian, like most of EOSNation. So out of those 50 people with the interns and the employees, we've got one guy. Only Dave, our American, is in there, right? So, I mean, before they said that it was US only, I told my girlfriend, listen, this year's Valentine's is canceled. I'm going all in on voice. I want to be a top voice influencer. I need to be there day one. She made plans with her girlfriends. She's like, okay, screw you, Steph. I'm going to go hang out with my girlfriends, whatever. And then a week before, they're like, you know what, guys, it's going to be US only. I'm like, great. Hey, Bridget, do you want to hang out? Oh, no, you already have plans and you're not too happy with me. Oh, okay, I get it. But, I'm super excited to get invited. I understand why they're taking their time though. One part of me is like, get me in there right now. And then the other part of me is like, take your time, build it right so that you don't mess up this one chance they have at building this social network, right? If they just open the floodgates and there's bugs and the system fails, like it's game over. It's not game over, but it's going to be
hard,
really bad for them, and it's going to backtrack their progress, right? So I understand why they're taking their time. I understand there's tons of legal ramifications. Some content has to be moderated in some country. It doesn't have to be in another. I know, I imagine that's a lot of what's going on right now, trying to build this system. But the incentivization in the social network has me absolutely excited. Like I've never done this before, but now I have a list of topics of posts that I want to write, right? And then I'm saving for voice. And like I've never done that before. So even though I'm not on the platform, it's already incentivizing me to create higher quality content. And like it's kind of incredible. And then with all the extra incentives that they're going to add, referrals, just the voicing mechanism where you can gamble on posts if you think they're going to go viral. Amazing. Put your money where your mouth is in terms of social media. It's gonna make higher quality content get filtered up to the top because you have to put your money where your likes are, basically, right? And so I'm super excited to see how that all gonna develop, and beyond that, just all the possibilities that they can add on. It's super exciting. Right now, it's very bare bones, as was to be expected, right? A few bugs that I've heard, some display issues or whatever, but they're being fixed. And I'm following the EOS everything EOS chat, and whenever Zach posts a link to voice, I'm like, post a picture. I want to
post the picture instead. I can't click your link.
Amazing, man.
But yeah, overall, I'm super pleased with what I've seen with voice. It's kind of pretty much in line with what I was expecting. These people that are angry about KYC, I get it. Privacy is important. And if you don't want to give your KYC to go on voice, that's very reasonable stance to take. I'm sad that you won't be on there, but I understand, right?
Yeah.
I mean, personally, in 2017, I was giving out my KYC to whatever exchange wanted it so I can buy those shit coins. So like, I made my choices, and so that's why for me, giving my KYC ID to Block One for voice is a no-brainer. I'm not worried about that, but it is a valid concern. But I think over time, we're gonna see some mega FOMO into voice, and people that are not willing to KYC right now might be willing in a year or two when there's more value and more reasons to be on there. And when Facebook launched, they were doing it by university, right? And it was kind of like, oh, I want to get in down there. Oh, but I can't. I'm not a university student. And then when they're like, okay, it's open, people are like, yeah, and they rush in. So what voice is kind of doing is like, they're kind of doing this on a country by country basis. So when it's like, okay, India, you're in. Imagine the hype that's going to cause in that country. Everyone's going to be like, okay, we're in, sharing on social media. There's going to be news about it, blah, blah, blah. So that mechanism is going to generate a lot of hype, I think, on a country by country basis. It's going to generate a lot of disappointment too for the countries that are not initially invited. But I'm confident that eventually we'll all have our chance to get in there. And I'm happy that they're taking their time and building it right.
Yeah, I'll be banging on the doors for you guys to get in, man. I know we'll just nudge Ash in the chat to tell us, hey, man, when are the Canadians getting in? When are our friends getting in? But
so someone sent me a message like, oh, you guys say you talk with Block One. Are you gonna get an invite for voice? I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Matthew sends logs to Block One, and that's the technical relationship, right? That's it. We don't talk with anyone about voice or anything else.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was talking to our colleague Mike and telling him that I got that similar feeling about that KYC. Actually, being on a social platform where you didn't have to worry about bots at all, it was kind of a weird experience. It was a visceral experience. I remember being in World of Warcraft for the first time as a kid when I was like 15, and like it just like blew my mind, right? You have like certain moments in time where you're like, wow, this is really different, right? And I think
Actual people.
actual
people.
I was like, wait, what is this? I think there's still like an importance of having like some anonymous accounts. So I wonder how that plays out, but they can go to other platforms and have the anonymous voice, because I think you do need to, have some people voice opinions anonymously so that we can keep, government under control and things like that. There's so many other things, but guys,
but those platforms exist already.
Exactly.
Those platforms already exist. So I know some people were hoping voice would be that platform.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of surprised that people were expecting that. But that option already exists, where something like voice, which high quality KYC social platform, that doesn't exist yet. So I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah, no, that absolutely, I agree with that. There are platforms already available for the purpose of anonymity, and voice, is fixing different side of the market there. So one thing that I want to ask you guys, what do you think of, voice being an impact? Like, what kind of impact it's going to have on EOS price?
You can sell he's a trader.
Yeah, when EOS pump. So like kind of, what is
before the launch of beta?
Right. So like, what is the relationship there for voice and EOS? Are they going to need EOS tokens at all, or or is it going to be voice token, or how is it linked to EOS token somehow?
So they haven't specified exactly how they're going to integrate voice into EOS, and that's led to a lot of FUD in the community. Like, Block One launch voice beta, not on EOS. You see, they don't care about EOS. To me, that's just kind of outrageous to do that logic jump.
And why would you launch a beta on the mainnet? It's we work with a lot of other applications that are running on mainnet, and still, while they're running on the mainnet, they are keeping their contracts. And actually, I'll even give an example afterwards. They're keeping their contracts closed to them. For example, WPS. Once we launch this and once we propose the MSIGs, if ever we wanted to make a change to them, it will require 15.21 again. So during that highly iterative state over the past 5 months where we've been building WPS, why would we have put it on a contract and gotten the 15/21 signatures? It makes no sense. Every time we would have wanted to make an update, we would have had to go through an MSIG again. It makes no sense. So Block One, same thing. While they're running this beta, highly iterative version of voice, they're going to be keeping it on their side, making sure that everything is good until, ideally, what we think is that at some point the token will do twofold. So for your question, Dimitri, in terms of how can it increase the price of EOS, what we believe is that, or what I believe anyways, maybe Steph has
not investment advice.
Not investment advice, but the link to the mainnet, I guess, will be twofold. One will be for accounts. We know that Block One bought 32 gigs of RAM, and they essentially have enough RAM to be able to give a free account to pretty much anybody that would want a free account. Why would they want to give a free account? Or why would they want to have accounts that are linked to the mainnet? Well, because if you have any type of asset value that you want to keep somewhere, that would be one of the things where you want it to be decentralized. And so if your EOS account is the one that keeps the value paired or linked to your voice tokens, then you want that to be kind of out of the hands of Block One. But how many likes there are, and kind of what maybe some of the visuals of the platform, whatever, that can be on a centralized server, not as important. But the valuation of your funds, that would want to be decentralized. You want to make that trustless. So the EOS token, or I guess the mainnet, the place that it would play would be for your assets, as well as for your identity, for your actual account. And then why would that potentially increase the price of the valuation of EOS? Is because then there's an actual need for the token. You actually need EOS. There's a need for it. There's a need for the mainnet to be performant and to be resilient. And so all of that plays into why potentially there'd be an increase in value of EOS.
Sure, the demand impacts price somewhat, but in crypto right now, narratives impact price way more, right? So when and if voice launches parts of their app on the mainnet, that's an obvious nod that, like, yes, Block One trusts the EOS mainnet. Look, we're building our main product on parts of the EOS mainnet. So that's going to give confidence to the market that, like, oh yeah, okay, Block One does actually care about the EOS mainnet. Some people right now think they don't. That's going to be a clear sign that you cannot now say that Block One does. So once Block One kind of gives that nod to the EOS mainnet that, hey, we trust the mainnet for our big application, then I think that's going to be a very clear signal to the market that that the EOS mainnet is backed by a huge company. And then that will also maybe get other companies to say like, hey, if Block One is building on the mainnet and they've had success and they're deployed a nice app, maybe we can do the same. And then so
this is where the architectural blueprint component comes in. So one of the big issues with EOS right now is if I'm an enterprise, what we've seen so far, if I'm a business so far, is that people were going all in. They're putting everything on the blockchain. And you don't need to put everything on the blockchain. That's extreme. There's a higher cost to running on the blockchain because centralized servers or centralized services are more efficient than decentralized one. And so, but that's a trade-off, right? So if you want more security, you want more trust, you go on the more decentralized side of the spectrum. But if you want more efficiency, lower cost, lower marginal cost, perhaps you go on more the centralized space. So what we've seen so far is that the applications developing on EOS have gone all in, everything on the blockchain. And then what happens when the price of the cost of resources goes up? Well, then maybe their business models don't necessarily make sense financially anymore. So what we're going to see ideally with voice is that we're going to see Block One giving us architectural blueprints of should you want to deploy a large scale application on and leveraging a blockchain, this is what it could look like. Well, this component would be on a permissioned blockchain that you control. This one would be on an open platform here. This would be on a service, centralized service here, and this component would be leveraging EOS.io, the mainnet or whatever. So all of this architectural blueprint then again fits into that narrative of if I want to deploy, how can I do it? What would this look like? And I think they're going to give us this. And when I suggested that to Brendan on Twitter, he did seem to agree that that's one of their strategies.
Yeah, I was looking at it more from an enterprise or a retail perspective, and I appreciate you giving that enterprise kind of architectural look because I didn't think about that at all. But I kind of look at it as from like a Trojan horse for users, right? Because one of the things just being on the platform is I notice it's all EOS users. I mean, that makes sense because voice is, launched by Block One. So that makes sense. But as we move forward, it seems like almost a Trojan horse or a first foot in the door for users that can then flow back to the EOS mainnet, right? So like, sure. Oh, I get this EOS account. Oh, now I can learn how to stake, or now, oh, what is this dice game? Or by that time, hopefully we're beyond dice games, but at least that is kind of like the flow.
And we're
that
beyond
I see
staking by then as well.
Yeah, possibly. But so I just wanted one more thing before we kind of hop out. We're an hour and probably 15, 20 minutes in. So I don't want to spend too much time, take too much of your day, but some of those team members on these side chains are the ones saying and kind of defaming the Block One or EOS mainnet in a way. And I just wonder what you're
incentivized to do it.
It's true. And I do want, so you kind of answered it there, but I want to hear your thoughts on these side chains. So which side chains are doing it well? Which side chains aren't? What is your overall feeling about the launch of these side chains and how they're doing now?
So my impression with EOS.io in general has changed significantly since, let's say, when January 21st, 2017, when we decided to become EOSNation to now. The way that I thought it was going to be was more so like the mainnet is going to be decentralized and everything's going to be on the mainnet. But the way that I see it now is that EOS.io is just an open source software, and that the more iterations of EOS.io that are out there, the more decentralized the actual ecosystem as a whole is. So for me, I think it's very, very positive to have all these other iterations of EOS.io. I'm very bullish for the software itself, because then what that does is you've got more people using it, more people testing it, and it just makes a more robust software. How is that then all linked to the mainnet? Well, I think that what we're seeing is that the mainnet is kind of the Manhattan or the Central Park, if you live in New York, of real estate, where everything really pinpoints back to that, but that it's maybe too expensive to live there. So to either buy real estate there or to rent there. And so you go to a layer below, and that layer below maybe is more affordable for you. But the problem with that is at a certain point, when the layer below becomes too crowded, because now everybody wants to live on the suburb of, I'm not from New York, so I don't know what that is, but what Brooklyn would be kind of the next, there you go. So everybody now wants to live in Brooklyn. Now Brooklyn becomes too expensive. So it now prices out people. And now people go, I guess, Jersey. I don't know where the next place would be, but they go in Jersey. And at some point, people are now living out in rural areas because then it just becomes too cost prohibitive to be anywhere else. And what we see, and why I see that that's positive, is we're going to see different use cases really find their niche in the ecosystem, in terms of where they belong, where they can make, you know, a profit, where they can run a successful business, we're going to see that being adjusted. And right now, during this transition period, we're just not there yet. There's not enough iterations yet. We have about 20 or so EOS.io iterations at this point. I think we're going to see many more. We're going to see hundreds of these. And all of these, again, will be linked back to EOS in the same way that most of the chains right now in the crypto space are linked back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin kind of is the king and is what values everything. Everything is linked to Bitcoin. Within the EOS.io ecosystem, everything, in my opinion, will be linked back to EOS.io, or to EOS, the token, for liquidity and for that kind of that trustless nature of the value of the token. So I think for me, I'm incredibly bullish on all these other side chains. I don't see the need to shit on the other projects, but it is an effective tactic. If you do want to bring people to your project, one of the ways to do it is to say that EOS, the mainnet itself, sucks, and so please come to my version of EOS.io. It is a tactic, sure.
But I think it's short-term focused.
It's very short-term focused, yes.
And it might end up biting those chains because they are alienating some people who do believe in EOS, right? Instead of trying all of us to build together. But one thing I do want to note about this concept of dApps having to move off the mainnet, some people think that's bad. But if a dApp is moving off the mainnet because the resource costs are too high, that's because another dApp has moved in.
Correct.
And has a better business model. And this dApp wants those transactions, wants that decentralized security that the mainnet provides, and is willing to pay more than you are for that. So you get bumped off. And I think that's fine. And like you said, there's going to be many layers. And but overall, the EOS.io ecosystem grows. And as the IBC functionalities get better implemented, either through Liquid Apps network that's doing great work there, or through many other interoperability, you know, functions that are coming online, I think the overall network effect of all these networks is going to grow together. So I don't see it as a problem. I write the EOS Hot Sauce along with Martin every week, and so we cover a lot of these networks. So you said like which network is doing really good. Personally, the amount of updates and progress that we see from Wax is pretty mind-blowing. Almost every single week, there's something new that I can write about Wax. Oh, this new developer tool. Oh, this new game is deploying there. Oh, this new partnership or whatever. So they've been working really, really hard. Their latest partnership with Tops has brought a lot of excitement to the Wax ecosystem, and I'm sure we're going to keep seeing more. And those are just the ones that we cover more because we're a block producer on EOS, on Wax, on Boss, and on Meet One. And Boss as well has been doing tremendous technological innovations. Most of the stuff is too complicated for me to understand, but I do understand that they're doing great work and they're really building deep for their specific business case, right? That they're focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. You know, and it's that ecosystem offers the ability to kind of self-purge these dApps that, you know, can adapt, sustain their business model, you know, as it goes forward. So I like that. That's pretty good. So we've covered tons of things about EOS and you guys, right? So I wanted to, you know, get into a little bit of a general discussion before we let you go. You know, I wanted to ask you guys about, you know, obviously DeFi is getting really hot in our industry, you know, and there's some issues that they're coming across right now in DeFi as well. What are your thoughts about DeFi at the moment? You know, where it is now, do you see that sector heating up, you know, even more, you know, becoming more successful, even with the challenges that they have, or like the CeFi stuff that we have right now as well, right? Which is a kind of like a combination of both. Is there like a hybrid version that would be better, or should we just be super, you know, decentralized on DeFi?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of DeFi. I was in a lot of DeFi products last year, SNX, Compound, all that good stuff, or good stuff for a while. But right now, I kind of, with these flash loans hacks, these Oracle failures, I've removed my funds from the DeFi ecosystem for now. I think there's some risks there. It's probably going to be fine, but on the other side, like CeFi or automated finance, like products like BlockFi and these other crypto lenders that are offering high APRs. That's where I'm storing my stable coins right now to hedge a bit against the DeFi risk. But overall, I think DeFi is going to be amazing. I think it's going to take the world by storm. The innovation that we see in these products every day is pretty mind-blowing. I know Denis on our team, he's very interested in all that type of stuff. Arbitrage bots, DeFi, all that stuff. He's building some of these things on EOS and laughing at Ethereum for the people that have to deal with those restrictions while they're building on Ethereum. However, Ethereum has all the money and all these people that are just super rich from buying in from a long time ago, that can shove a lot of money in these DeFi products. And it's like, oh, whatever, if I lose it, it's not so bad. Whereas EOS, we don't have that kind of liquidity yet. So the space on EOS is growing a bit slower, but Equilibrium is doing a fantastic job. We post about their products pretty much every week on the Hot Sauce as well. They're bringing a lot of innovation. And then EOS also is another platform on EOS that has money markets where you can deposit certain assets, earn an interest, or deposit as collateral, borrow other interest. They recently added the DApp token to their platform. That platform still has very low volume, but it's proof of concept. It's growing, and I think the trend is definitely to the up and right for DeFi in general.
What do you think, Yves? Anything you're looking at?
So I was opening things in the background. Yeah, for me, like EOS DT. No, I was opening
directly looking at it.
Directly looking at it. So with the DeFi space, I think DeFi is probably one of the most exciting things in the crypto space so far, especially right now when we're in kind of a sideways bear market, sustained bear market for a long time. I think that opening, and the way that I see DeFi and why I think it's so important is it's kind of still building that plumbing, the electrical, like the really foundations of this space. And so I think that that's really important, so that whenever we do get kind of an influx of assets coming in, that the foundations are really solid and they're laid out so that people can start taking advantage of the system itself. And so one of the players, like Steph mentioned, that I'm very bullish about and that I really particularly enjoy, we work closely with, is Equilibrium within the EOS space. Another one is Bitfinex as well, with their EOS Finex, and with their USDT Omni version, I guess the EOS version on there. The more of these relays that we're going to have that connect all the different ecosystems and that take advantage of the different features of different blockchains together, the more smoothness and kind of seamingless, the smooth and seamingless that is, the better it is for the end user, because then you're able to have just more options, more choices in terms of what you want to do with your assets. And in the traditional finance sector, we have all of that architecture and all of those foundations laid out. It's already been there. And so you have all of these possibilities, but within the crypto space, still very limited. Even though it's really good, still very limited. But as that network grows, and DeFi is such a core component of that, as that grows, it just means more options for the end user, better possibilities for you to decide what you want to do with your assets in a very easy, safe, and I guess intuitive, with the UIs that we're seeing being built, intuitive manner as well. So DeFi is super bullish on that. I think it's extremely, extremely important for us to grow this space, to have DeFi at the base.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it looks like, if I'm hearing correctly, you got some responsibilities that you'll have to get to here in about 2 minutes, but, so we'll let you guys go. I do have my last two questions. We always ask a book question, but my first question is, we had Alex Mashinsky, speaking of CeFi, Dima, on the podcast last time and he talked a lot about how coronavirus is affecting, geopolitical climates as well as economic. What do you guys think about its impact on crypto and the world in general? And then hit us with a book recommendation. Could be crypto, could not, doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, the corona impact is going to be very, very serious. I don't think everyone really appreciates the changes to our lives, especially in North America, that's coming over the next few weeks and months. And it's probably going to have some long-lasting impacts on how we behave in society. We'll see how that goes. I've bought a bit of extra supplies in case, I have to go into quarantine, and I've told my family and friends to do the same. But in terms of a book recommendation, for me, I read in 2016, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, which really opened my eyes to the power of narratives. And it's just like, wow, humans just live around stories and narrative. And then this was in our book club. And then after that, we're like talking about Bitcoin. I'm like, oh man, this Bitcoin narrative is too strong. This is going to be unstoppable. And that's really part of what led me into this amazing adventure that I'm now on. So that, yeah, those would be my thoughts.
Love it.
Yeah, I think Steph touched upon the coronavirus. I just came back from Asia, so my viewpoint is completely different. I've spent a lot of my time in Asia where kind of, it originated. And so my viewpoint is very different with that. I think that right now, the way that we see it and what it's going to do is that we see two completely different extremes. We see people that are either very careless about this or people that are very paranoid about this. And there seems to be nothing in between. Yeah, Steph is definitely on the paranoid side. But there's nothing in between.
That's the group chat stuff.
Issue. Yeah, this is actually an issue right now. So the government responses and kind of I guess regular person on the ground response has been largely in one of those two. Oh, nothing's going on, everything is great, or oh my God, the sky is falling. So I think we're going to see kind of something in between, in the middle. As we become more used to living with this, as this becomes more of a norm. Does this have potential political, geopolitical, economic impact? For sure. We're already seeing that with the markets. We saw that with the oil crash last week. And then this plays into much larger ecosystem. And so will it have economic impact? It already is. And will it have a greater economic impact? And will that carry on to the crypto space? I believe it will, definitely. Will it go up or down? Will it, bring more people into the crypto space or remove people from the crypto space? I'll leave that to especially Dimitri's imagination. He can figure that one out. But yeah, definitely it will have impact. I cannot foresee any scenario where this does not somewhat have an impact in crypto, direct impact. So right now we're kind of, is it really an impact or not? We're not really there yet, but I think there will be direct impacts at some point. In terms of book recommendation, I was asked this question, actually. I did a TEDx talk in China a year and a half ago. And one of the things that I recommend, which is kind of very different than what people would expect and what they kind of want to hear at the same time. The Little Prince by Alexandre Saint-Exupéry. It's a super classic. I read it the first time. I think my parents were reading it to me when I was really young. I read it over and over. I tried to read it over and over. And for me, part of why I recommend that book is it's super small, you can read it within a couple of hours. And it just, I think, opens up your mind to the possibilities and why dreaming is important. And why having something to wake up in the morning for, why that's important. Keeping your mind open is important. And why that's important in the crypto space, I think because we just started, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And so keeping your mind open to what's possible, I think, is what's in a way driving this space. It's really driving innovation within this space. And so it's too early, in my opinion, to start closing in and to start, appreciating what we have right now, because I think we're nowhere near where we're going to be. So kind of that feeling is really well represented within that book. Little Prince.
Awesome. Those are two great recommendations, guys. I appreciate those. I think Steph's mindset around the coronavirus is formed by a group chat that we're in. I don't want to give too much away, but there are definitely some doomsday preppers in there. But guys, amazing episode as a EOS bag holder, but as a crypto user in general, I appreciate what you're doing for the EOS network and everything you guys have done up to this point and what you're going to do in the future. So thanks for coming on. I guess tell the listeners where they can find you before you leave.
Sure. Follow us on Twitter. EOS_Nation is where we post our updates. Join us on Telegram for some more lively chats. EOS Nation as well. You can follow me personally, Stephane_Bisson. I talk more about my thoughts on Bitcoin, blockchain, centralization, the economy, panicking for Corona, all that good stuff.
Nice.
So everything that Steph said, and then Twitter, just at Yves Larose, or YVES EOSN, so EOSN. And then the rest is pretty much what Steph said. So thank you very much for having us on. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great.
Hey, we'll have to get up to Canada sometime, fellas, but thanks.
Maybe in a year.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to check out Layer 1 on all the audio and video platforms listed in the description. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next week.